Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Creighton Show. Another exciting show, definitely another exciting guest. We're going all the way to France. We're going to talk to a beautiful young lady, Mary G. Harris, and a story of, let me tell you where we're going. How about a whole bunch of opportunities being thrown at you? And when we get a lot of opportunities thrown our way, especially when we're young, we really don't know which way we need to go because everything just sounds so great when you're young and you got that beast mindset starting to develop and you really want to grab every piece of fruit you can. But unfortunately, sometimes all those pieces of fruit may not be the best choice. I'm not saying you can't dabber in them, but what happens when you dabber in so many and you really don't find that true piece of fruit until later on in life? Because the key thing that happens here, opportunity also comes with its ugly face of situations that you have to overcome that you didn't see because it looks so good when it's presented to you. Let's go even deeper. How about at a young age falling in love and to your demise, you almost die? Today on the show, Mary's going to share that and a heck of a lot more and what she's doing to keep her beast mindset and play it forward to the world. Mary, welcome to the show, baby girl. How you doing?
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that was quite an introduction.
In France, originally from British, because I hear the accent.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I'm British.
Tell the viewers a little bit about who you are first before we get into your show.
Okay, so the short version. So yes, I'm British. I grew up in the UK and then I moved to France about 20 years ago now. So quite early in my career. So I was working by then and it was a lifestyle choice for me. So it was about coming to a beautiful part of the world where it's warmer. The whole cliche about the UK and the rain is true. I wanted to get away from that. And I was looking for, a lifestyle that suited me. So here I have the sea, the mountains. It's a really beautiful place to live. So that was what brought me here, even if at the time I had a lot of, but this is a really important moment in your career, and does this really make sense? And why would you put lifestyle over career development? But it's the choice I made.
What was your life like in the UK prior to even going to France? I mean, did you come from a stable environment? Because you had a lot of opportunities being presented to you even as a young lady. What was it like for you living over there before you decided to relocate?
Well, I consider I was really lucky. I mean, I had two fantastic parents who really supported me. They always gave me that message about, you can be whoever you want to be, you can do what you want to do. There was a strong message as well there and about hard work. And I was that student who was top of the class, who did all of the things. I joined all the music groups, all the sports groups, do everything. I got into a really good university. I got a good degree. I had a lot of opportunities. I really had a lot of opportunities and I definitely kind of embraced that. I tried to do probably too many things sometimes. But yeah, I had a fantastic.
What do you mean you try to do too many things at one time? Give me a little insight on that and how that came about.
Well, for example, this was when I was still at school. Every now and again, my mum would sit me down and just go, "Okay, Mary, you're looking tired." So, of all the things, the music group, the this thing, the that thing, how about you maybe think about maybe dropping one or, reducing your commitment to it because I think you're kind of burning the candle at both ends. And I'll be like, and I knew she was right. And then I would maybe change something and then something new would come along and we would go through that process a few times of her saying, you're doing too much, which was, I mean, it was great to have that because I did need it. I needed it.
Why do you think you was doing too much? Was it to fill their expectations or your belief that they told you can do everything and you probably felt if you didn't gravitate to it right then, maybe it would slip away because you're still young at that time. So What was that like?
Yeah, good question. I think a bit of both. Like some of it is, I like learning new things, having different experiences. I'm definitely drawn to that. So that's on me. Um, but yeah, there was also something, and this was certainly something I got into later in life with a therapist around, equating love from my parents to kind of performance. I remember her saying, "But you were some kind of a show pony when you were a kid," and I was like, "Was I?" And this is not something I kind of blame my parents for, but yes, I definitely saw a performance equals love and recognition thing there. So I think that was a big part of it too.
What was the difficult part of trying to live up to those expectations? I know at that time you probably couldn't really analyze it, but you did say something I think is very a good pivoting point here. When you went to therapy, the therapist kind of pointed out that you was basically getting validation from them, but it was not the way to get the validation. So when you was going through these different transformations as a young person, which ones was really, now that you look back, was it something that you thought and be like, you know what, I never should have really did that?
Um, I don't think I have one where I don't really do regret. So I don't really think there was anything that I didn't learn from. So um, or that I didn't get something positive from. So I'm not sure I have one where I say, oh yeah, should never have gone down that path or shouldn't have tried it. I don't really see one like that.
So everything that you did was basically a purpose for you, even though your parents said, you know what, you're burning the candles at both ends. Kind of go back a little
Yeah.
bit. Okay.
Mm.
Now let's go down this rabbit hole. You're young and 19 years old, 18 years old.
Mm.
You fall in love and something unforeseen pretty I won't call it unforeseen. Did you know this was going to take place? Before you tell me that, tell the viewers a little bit about how that changed your trajectory with what your parents saw in you, what you saw in yourself, and the outcome. Because
Mm.
a lot of people need to realize that all it takes is somebody that usually when somebody does something to you that changes your trajectory is always somebody that you know or that you brought into your
Mm.
circle.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, of course, it's not something I saw coming at all. But I was in my second year of university, so I was at this university ticking the boxes, doing the thing. I'd fallen in love, and I mean we were young. It was another student on my course. It was the start of the second year. I found out that he over the summer vacation he'd been seeing someone else. I mean it's not an unusual story up to here. So I ended the relationship, and it was sad for me. It was sad for him. I mean, we're still very young, but yeah, but he took it badly. And initially, it didn't seem that unusual. The behavior that he had was like, okay, this kind of happens. People break up. He was sad. He'd be like calling me, turning up at my house, and I was like, yeah, but no, I really, I don't trust you anymore. The relationship is over. And he wouldn't accept it. And there were sort of different incidents leading up to it. But finally, he turned up at a party. He found a knife in the kitchen. He hid it in his clothes, and he waited for me to go and use the bathroom. And when I did, I mean, I had obviously no idea. He came in and he attacked me, and he stabbed me in the stomach. Thank goodness we were somewhere where there were so many people who called an ambulance. They came, and yeah, I very nearly died. I was very lucky that they came so soon. They had to call in a surgeon who'd already gone home to operate on me because the damage was so bad. And yeah, like it was like everything I thought was, I don't know, all my references in life just went out the window.
You said there was signs leading up to this. I know you were young when you say 19 years old. You really ain't looking at signs, but what were some of the signs that outside of him being persistent, but what were some of the signs that when now you look back, they was pretty deadly signs?
Um, For me, it was only so when we were together. I mean, he was certainly someone who lacked some confidence, who I felt like I was, spending a lot of time trying to boost his confidence. But that's, especially at that age, I mean, that's not so unusual, like 18, 19, like we were doing a really tough degree, and there was kind of good reasons, I guess, to sometimes be worried about the outcome. But where it got weird was when it turned into, he would find ways when we were at university, or mostly at university, to kind of get me alone and just say the same things he'd been saying over and over again about, wanting to be with me. And it was like he felt like there was no choice. It was like, no, but he didn't use words like I own you, but it sounded like that. It was like, no, but I have a choice here. Like, it doesn't have to be something that I stay in. And then it was about 2 weeks before he actually attacked me. We were at another student event, and he cornered me alone, started just going on and on and on about how he was feeling and how miserable he was. And finally, it was the security staff that dragged him away. And I was like, whoa, this is now like another level. And from then on, I just felt scared. I felt scared most of the time, actually, about when is he going to just appear somewhere and what's he going to say and do. I felt like we were already moving out of what was in the zone of my kind of normal experience, if you like. But even then, of course, I never imagined anything as bad as what actually happened.
Did you have people at that age that you was able to talk to, your parents, about his behavior pattern, and your friends? What did they say? Because most people see what you don't see, and especially parents. Did you share this with anybody else?
For sure. I mean, it was very visible. So since we were students, like everybody could see what was happening. And actually, in that respect, the party where he turned up, they deliberately not invited him to stop him from being there. People were trying to kind of put a barrier, put some distance between us. And I mean, I told my parents, and they were worried. They were saying, well, just keep your distance, just keep away from him. But I mean, we were studying on the same course, so I mean, we still saw each other every day in our lessons. So it was pretty difficult to stay away.
When the encounter took place and you was found, and they brought the paramedics and stuff in to treat you, was he eventually apprehended, charged with attempted murder? What was his repercussions from that?
He was charged with attempted murder. His argument, or his defense, if you like, was that he was too mentally ill to be responsible for his actions. That was the route his lawyer took. And so it took a while before it came to court as well. They kept saying, well, maybe we can't actually have a trial because he's not in a good enough state. There was finally a trial. And so I had to give evidence. I had to be what is wrong with the whole process is I was a witness. When you do that, you're a witness, and I'm not a witness. I'm a victim. But okay. So I had to talk about my experience, and the outcome was that he was not charged in the end with attempted murder. They called it grievous bodily harm instead, which felt inadequate. And he spent 2 years in a hospital, in a psychological institution to get support, and then he was out.
This may sound crazy as hell. Usually when you're that infatuated, you contact the person. Did he ever try to reach back out to you when he got out?
No. It was one of my concerns. So before he was released, I spoke with a probation officer, and there was something that was established that said I think it was about a year, he wasn't allowed to. It would be a breach of his release if he were to contact me in any way. And then, but apart from that, he could have done. And no, he never has.
How did you manage to? How long were you in the hospital with your recoveries and injuries?
In the end, I wasn't in the hospital itself for so long. At first, they said you'll be here for at least a month. We don't know what, if you're going to recover, how well you'll recover. And then when I did start to feel better, I was like, I have to get out of here as fast as I possibly can. And so they released me after 2 weeks, and then I went home. And then I was at home for a couple of months then, and I had family there to help me. I went to see my doctor back at home, who was just like, "What? What on earth has happened here?"
Right.
But what helped in terms of the physical recovery was being so young as well.
And I was getting ready to say that, but outside of being young, you're probably at this time maybe 20, 22 years old. You almost died. I mean, when does self-reflection really start to take over? Because usually, probably in these situations, I've never had it happen to me before, but I would think that the light bulb does click on. Hey, I almost died. I had all these beautiful opportunities. Now I have to really go back and change that beast mindset on where once I was this hungry, hungry animal. Now something like this could have taken me out like this. How do you keep that mindset even at that young age, and more
Mm.
importantly, go back to the campus where all this took place?
Um, I would say the real revelation or came later, like it came much, much later. What actually happened at the time was I was like, I need to get back there. I need to. My objective at the time was like, my life is going back on track. I am not letting this guy ruin all these things that I've been building up to and what I'm doing. That was my. Yeah, I can feel it, like saying it, and I can remember that feeling. It was like, this is not going to change what's happening in my life. So I was very focused on, I have to get better physically. I saw a therapist. And I remember going to her and just going, I don't know what this is going to do to me, but we're fixing it right now.
Hmm.
Which is, in retrospect, so very naive in terms of, but okay, that's what I had available to me then. So yeah, that was, I got back as fast as I could. And yeah, I had to go through a whole process of going back to the campus, going back to the place where I'd actually been attacked. The court experience was awful. But I was in this very much this mode of, I need to get through this, and I was trying to kind of erase it, I guess. And that was kind of working for me for a while. It was
You,
later in life it didn't work for me anymore.
you mentioned something. I'm gonna backtrack a little bit. You mentioned the court experience. How was that for you at a young age? And I'm pretty sure your parents were there to look at this guy who said he loved you. I guess he did in some sick, perverted way. But,
Mm.
here's a guy that pretty much stabbed you. I'm kind of curious. They will allow him to talk, or unless he didn't take the stand on his own behalf. Did he even
Mm.
say he's sorry for what he did? I mean, could he look at you in the eyes?
So yeah, really good question. So this was a really key point. So I was the first person to give evidence. So, and it was in it's called the Old Bailey in London. So it was in London that it happened. So it's this big ancient court. So it's an intimidating and impressive environment. So anyway, I got myself psyched up for going in there. You walk in, you're in this sort of box ready to do your thing. And they brought him in. He was brought in by whoever was bringing him in, and he started freaking out. So he started kind of screaming and shouting, and the judge just said, okay, stop right now, take him back out. We need to take a break. And I was so angry. So angry. I was like, so here we are. This is like this horrible thing I'm being asked to do. And now he is the one kind of it's too difficult for him to be here and to see me. Apparently that was the feedback. It was too hard for him to see me. Like, okay. So, and then my concern then was that they would say, okay, we can't proceed. And I was like, now we're here. I really want to just do this because, coming back 6 months later so they came to the conclusion that I could give evidence without him being in the room. And then for the rest of the trial, the other people would give their evidence and he would be there. And then they also asked me to just, because I had the right normally to be in the public gallery afterwards to hear what was going on. They asked me to stay away because it was just too hard for him, which I think you can kind of imagine how wrong that feels. So, I mean, in some ways it was easier that I gave my evidence without having to see him again, but it just felt so, unjust,
What was
Unfair
the
just doesn't really, yeah.
what was the prosecutor's examination of you? Like, what kind of questions were they asking you? Because I would think that they would try to say that you did something to provoke him to do
Oh,
that.
yes.
Y-
Oh, yes.
Really?
So that's, yeah. Oh, yeah. So, I mean, because it was a criminal offence, so it's the police and so in the UK it's the Crown, so the state is the Crown versus the person. So, I was advised by the police, and they told me, or someone else who was speaking to me before the trial just said, well, just make sure whatever question they throw at you, be really clear about being precise in your answers, and if you don't understand the question or you think it's not clear, then say so, which was really good advice, because one of the they tried to turn it into you were never clear with him about the fact that you were breaking up, that I'd kind of broken up with him for an unreasonable reason, if you like, and that I was, I don't know, behaving in some kind of provocative way. So yeah, there was a question which was something along the lines of they were also trying to sort of paint this picture that he'd always been behaving strangely, and quite clearly he had a mental illness, which just wasn't the case. And one of the questions was, wouldn't you, they would say it like this as well, wouldn't you say, Miss Harris, that his behavior had always been strange, or something like that? and I just sort of said, well, what do you mean by strange?
Right.
And then there was this silence. It was like, okay, well, next question. Like, I mean, what does that even mean? You're trying to lead me into, like, it's clearly, so you're trying to lead me into saying something. It's like, well, the most ambiguous question in the world. It's like, I'm not answering that question. And it was also something like the story of how he'd been with someone else in the summer. Didn't you know, or isn't it true? They always say, isn't it true? Isn't it true, Miss Harris, that you knew it was just a peck on the cheek or something like that? And I just said, no. So that kind of killed that. It's like, but just, even to be sort of attacked about the fact that I'm explaining the fact that someone attacked me is just, it feels so wrong.
Now,
so
who
unfair.
did you have to collaborate your story? Because he got you in the bathroom. I'm pretty sure he ran out after it was done. So did you have any witnesses that pretty much say, hey, this dude actually did that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So there was that. At least there was no kind of ambiguity, if you like, because so I'd been trying to go to the bathroom, and I'd gone to try to shut the door, and he was pushing on the door, but like it's a party, and he just said, hey, there's someone already here, and then they kept going, and I opened the door to say, hey, like, why, just give me 5 minutes, and that's when he pushed his way in and he locked the door. And these are memories that are all a little bit patchy now, but as soon as I saw the knife, I started screaming, and like everyone in the entire house heard me screaming.
Was it multiple? Did he multiple stab you, or was this one and he ran?
No, it was. Wasn't even that. So he started speaking. He stabbed me once, and this is where there's a kind of there's a blank right. In my, I saw there's a memory from before, and then there's the next memory I have is looking down and seeing this knife coming out of my stomach covered in blood, and some kind of survival instinct kicked in, because my thought was, okay, there's kind of a pause here, maybe I've got a chance to get out. So I actually stood up. I still don't know how. I unlocked the door and I staggered out of the room. So I actually got myself out in the end. But in actual fact, I'd been slumped against the door until then, which is why no one could open the door. And I honestly don't know what I can't even say where he was standing, what he was doing at that point. But that's the photo I have. That's the photo.
That's crazy. And I'm glad that you was able to recover from that. And sorry I took you down that road. I appreciate you sharing that. Moving forward, when he's allowed to go outside and you tell your story, did he eventually see you at any other point during the trial, or you didn't see him no more till after this? How did you hear about the sentence and what he was, the final outcome? Through your lawyer?
That's the police again. So what happened during the trial was it went on for about a week. they asked me not to stay. So I was spending my days in these cafes close to where the courthouse was, and people would come out. Friends and family would be coming out to visit me, kind of update me on what was going on. And then, at least in the way the UK system works, is the jury comes back with their conclusion, and then the sentencing happens afterwards. So it was about 2 weeks later, and that was a separate thing.
Right.
And the police come forward with they call it an impact statement. You have to talk about what this has done to your life. And they decide sentencing based on that. So yeah, the police let me know. So I wasn't there.
Briefly, share with me what that impact statement was, because I think the viewers need to understand or be careful with who they bring in their circle, because now
Yeah.
this is the critical part. What was that impact at the end of the day? That final blow that put the nail in the casket.
Yeah, well, honestly, what went in there at the time and what I think now should have been in there, with the years that have gone by, and the fact that it's not something that went away the day I came out of hospital. The impact statement talked about my physical injuries, the fact that potentially it might give me some digestive problems in the future, but which they couldn't be specific about. And then it was very short term. It was very, well, she's in the middle of studying, maybe she'll have to repeat the year, she can't do sports anymore. It was very much like that. Whereas the real impacts were so much more than that. And apparently it was said, my mum reminded me of this recently, apparently something that was said during the course of the trial was something like, well, she's young, she'll get over it, it won't really kind of affect the rest of her life. So completely not true, both physically, emotionally. I mean, there've been multiple repercussions later in life. So, and of course, none of that was in the impact statement.
You walk away from the trial, justice is served. May not be what we wanted to have been the outcome, but at least it was served. But like you said, the impact statement is, how do you move forward? It took you a while to get over the flashbacks. Continues to happen. You go to therapy. What was the change in? What was the pivotal part of the therapy session in your own beast mindset that says, you know what, I'm not gonna let, like you said earlier, you're not gonna let this guy dictate the future. But realistically, how long did it take you to get back to where you're at now?
Honestly, years. On anyone looking from the outside, I got back to university, I caught up on everything I missed, I carried on and joined the class as if nothing had happened, more or less. And I finished my studies, career, and so on. So I would say it looked like, it looked like everything was back on track. And in retrospect, I buried so much, but I also think I wasn't equipped to deal with all the things that happened. And it was actually much later. It was in my 30s, I would say, the next kind of big moment, which was because I had other relationships after that maybe I ended or someone else did, and I didn't really experience that fear that I thought I would, that okay, something similar is going to happen. And then much later, after a much longer relationship with somebody else, where we were together for about 9 years, then it all came back. And
You went into a 9-year relationship, and the past creeped back in.
Yeah.
How did that creep back in? He do something that triggered that?
So I was in this relationship for about 9 years. I was with someone I thought I was going to marry. That relationship then didn't work out, and the person I had been with he was behaving badly. We had bought a house. He was making that difficult. And what that turned into actually was PTSD for me. So I actually started having, which I didn't realize that was what it was at first. But yeah, post-traumatic stress. And it was provoked by the fact that the whole new situation many years later was reminding me of things about what happened before.
What did you do? You just walked away from that?
So fortunately, so this was, I was in France by this time. I'd started seeing a therapist here about the breakup, about the fact that it was very difficult and stressful, and the finances, and the fact that this long relationship that I thought was leading to kids and marriage and things that I'd been kind of just hadn't happened. For me, that was what was going on. And then it was actually later, I'd actually left France. I moved to Switzerland. And that was part of starting a new life plan that I had. And I'd come to visit here, so France, for a weekend. And I got back from that weekend and I woke up on Monday morning and I couldn't get out of bed. I was terrified. I was like, what on earth is happening to me? And all I had were these flashbacks to my weekend where I realized I'd spent the whole weekend like looking over my shoulder, kind of wondering subconsciously if someone was, so my ex, if he was going to come and attack me. That's actually what was happening. Although he'd never done something that might necessarily make me think that. And so I mentioned the therapist because I called her and I said, something just crazy is happening to me. I don't know what it is. Can you please, can we talk? And she said, Mary, this is PTSD. I've been wondering if and when this might sort of emerge. This is what's happening right now. I was like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And actually in that, what I then eventually did was a different kind of therapy. So I did, she recommended, and luckily I found someone in Switzerland who was fantastic. It's called somatic experiencing. And it's about releasing the trauma physically. She said, look, We've done all the talking about it, all the mental stuff. She said, but there's stuff in your body that you have not ever let go of. And that's what I think is going to help you. And she was right. It was a really, really amazing experience.
Briefly explain what kind of therapy that is and how does that work, and how were you able to just release it? Because if somebody's listening to it just verbatim, they're gonna be like, what the heck is she talking about? Release it. Like, give us a little insight on that kind of therapy and how did you do it to get to where you're at now?
So this other therapist spoke to me about it. She said your trauma is locked in your body and it hasn't been released. I was like, okay. She said you need to find someone who works with it. It's called somatic experiencing. It was developed by someone called Peter Levine. And it's actually quite widely used. And she said, I bet if you were still in France, we would struggle to find someone who could work with you in that way. But I bet you can find someone in Switzerland. Mm-hmm. So before going, I read these books, I watched these videos, and it's all about allowing your body to move in a way that releases things which are locked in your nervous system. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, so I'll try. I listened to some things, sat in a chair, tried to do it. It didn't work. And when I then did it with a therapist, the key things are, first of all, you have to feel completely safe. If you don't feel completely safe, you can't do it. And the idea is that you don't revisit the trauma because it's traumatizing, but you kind of look at it from the outside, and your body starts to release the trauma. So what that looked like for me was, we had this session, I was sitting on a chair a bit like this, and she just kept saying, think about your body and what do you feel and what do you do, and just keep to try and get you to focus on what your body is doing. And little by little, during the course of our conversation, I ended up with my knees up to my chest, my arms around my knees, and my head in my arms. And she was like, just what do you want to do? And then she just said, that would be the position that you would have liked to have put yourself in before you were stabbed, to protect yourself. But you couldn't because you didn't have time. And just suddenly I was back, not in the room exactly, but looking into the room where I was attacked. She had her arms around me and I was just looking. And then she said, okay. And she got me to visualize moving away from my attacker. So changing the story, if you like. I wasn't helpless and attacked. I was actually physically moving away, and she got me to visualize like leaving the room. And I was I had this picture in my head, and the whole time this was going on, I was shaking and shaking and shaking and shaking. And that process of shaking is what's actually releasing all this stress that's actually stored in your nervous system. And yeah, it was. It's an incredible experience, and at the end, you have to be very careful because you need this feeling of safety, which is why she had her arms around me. It was really important that I had that physical reassurance, and then slowly, they bring you back out of it. And I mean, at the end, it's just kind of you feel just sort of and exhausted, but it was a massive shift. I mean, we had some other sessions, but that was the one session where there was this real big physical release that happened.
You
I was
said
like,
you had
wow, okay.
other sessions. How long did it take to really? Let me clarify this. Make sure that I'm saying this right. You was able to work with them to get rid of the incident, but you still remember the incident itself, but the incident no longer controls your inner space, so to speak. Correct?
Yeah, yeah.
How many sessions did you have to do to feel comfortable with the release of all this?
Yeah, I think it was around 5 or 6 for that current PTSD, I would call it, to release, and then it then also freed me up. This whole situation I was dealing with my ex, where there were lawyers and money and things like that. It just then made it so much easier because there wasn't all this fear and stress kind of built into the. So it became a different situation, and the PTSD was gone. It was gone.
How do you feel now?
Currently, I feel good, but that wasn't the end. That wasn't the end of the journey. Later in life, when I met someone else, and we were trying for a baby, and then becoming pregnant, that brought stuff up again. Then, because it's all about that particular part of my body. I discovered that I had a kind of idea that because of what happened, somehow, I couldn't bring something, I couldn't bring life into the world, but I didn't even realize I had that going on at all until I was actually confronted with having a situation where I was trying for a baby and trying to get pregnant. And so, there was another wave then.
So the guy that you was with for 9 years, you walked away from that one, then you meet another guy, now you want to have a baby, but where you were stabbed at made you question if you can really carry a child at this point, because that was the area which you was stabbed in. Let me ask the question: did he do anything to trigger, or was it just the fact that he wanted to have a child and you wanted to have a child?
It was just the wanting to have a child, and then I was having these really kind of. I discovered I was scared I couldn't have a child, and there was some rationality to it. There were some things about the damage that had been caused that made it more complicated, but I realized it was actually a bigger emotional thing. I had this idea, somehow connected to what happened to me, which again I wasn't aware of, that somehow I didn't deserve it, or that the fact that this happened to me was some kind of punishment for something. And that goes back to, and it happens so much with trauma, and it's also kind of so unfair, there's this kind of shame associated with it. Like somehow, on some level, you did something to deserve this awful thing that happened to you. And that's what was coming through when I was trying to get pregnant.
How did you go back to handle that? Did you have to go back to the same treatment plan to unlock and release that as well?
At that point, no. I'm trying to remember. I think I probably had a couple of sessions with a therapist I'd known before then, but mostly I worked on that by myself, I would say. And that's where my new partner, now husband, was also very supportive in helping me identify that, talk about it, realize that, these are kind of stories that are coming through from my past, but they're not anything to do with. Yeah.
Wow. Let's go here. You're now, I don't want this to sound cruel in any way, but I tell people shit happens for a reason. No matter how sick the world gives you, shit happens. But how you overcome it can make a heck of a difference. You went through different situations over one guy's uh, uh, um, emotionally unstability, and from that you have transcended into so many different aspects of your life of Mary. My question here is, I'm trying to make sure I say it right without saying it the wrong way. With so many different experiences, which one was the one that was the most difficult out of all these different things? Was it the baby? Was it the 9 year? Was it the court? Was it the guy, or was it the combination? But one of them had to have more of a shift to
Mm.
take you to the finish line. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, yeah. And it was one more that hadn't that I haven't talked about yet
Go
because I
for it.
wasn't done.
Go for it.
That wasn't the end of it, the getting pregnant. So once I'd had my amazing daughter, so from being stabbed, like I have a scar that's like the length of my torso, and pregnancy, of course, stretches and pulls that whole part of your body, and the pregnancy then pulled apart some of the
Surgery,
stitches and
stitches.
from before. So I needed more surgery, and that was terrifying. And the fact that it meant literally and metaphorically reopening the old scar to go in and repair and then close it again was absolutely terrifying. And I knew it needed to be done, if you like, but there wasn't any urgency. It wasn't yet causing me physical, apart from the fact that I was aware, and I could choose when it would happen because it wasn't yet causing me more problems. And it was actually when I made the decision to, because I kept saying I'm definitely not ready. I can't do that. I can't do it. And it was actually when I was doing my coaching training that the subject kind of came back. And in exploring it there, I was like, I really think this is something that I need to do as part of to kind of finish this process. And unfortunately, it's a very painful and but on all levels process. But this is something that I kind of need to do to kind of really come out the other side. So I scheduled the surgery. And yeah, it was horribly painful. It brought up many more things. But yeah, I feel like that was the pivotal or the step that still really needed to happen in terms of me finally. I'm never going to say putting the subject to bed. I think that's one of the things that you learn with this. It's like there's always something associated to it that's going to pop up somewhere, somehow. You're never completely kind of, I'm not going to forget what happened to me. And I don't want to, actually. And I think going through that whole journey is what helped me to come back to some of the aspects of the whole thing that I hadn't yet done. And in terms seeing that it connects to the work I now do, which in the sense that when people talk about their experiences, if they talk about trauma, if they talk about other things that have happened in their life, I have a deep understanding of what that might feel like or look like in a way that I never would have done without having to go through those different experiences myself, and the awareness of there are so many different modalities that can help someone. People kind of go, I saw a therapist and I don't feel better. It's like, well, yeah, it might not be the thing that you need. I needed this whole physical thing that works really well for me, as it turns out. But I never would have learnt about that if I hadn't gone through those experiences. So
I guess that last little bit of surgery was really what we might call a detoxification. Just getting rid of all that stuff that happened and say, hey, this happened, but we're going to take it to the next step. You have a beautiful daughter. Let's open up. Let's get rid of everything. Let's put a brand new patch on things and see how that gets you mentally. You mentioned how all of this empowered you to get into coaching. Tell me a little bit about your business. Tell the viewers a little bit about your business, and they heard the story, but now let's talk a little bit about your business and how all that you went through is now put into your company and help other individuals?
Well, it really, and actually, this is something way earlier in the process that a therapist said to me. She was like, the ultimate place to get to, or the thing that you can do with all of this apparently bad experience, is turning it into something which actually allows you to help other people. I remember her saying that like 15 years ago, long before I even thought about being a coach. And I was like, yeah, we'll see. I'm not quite sure I'm there yet. But in actual fact, of course, it did kind of come around that way. And the fact of supporting other people, sort of, it's turning all that experience into something that's actually positive. And so in terms of the work I do now, it's really mixed. Some of it is life coaching. So it can be sometimes quite traumatic experiences that people have had, even though if we say in coaching, we're not, it's different from therapy. But when people speak of those traumatic experiences, I can hold that space and understand the kind of support that someone needs when they're going through that. The things around, so I've worked with a lot of people going through different transitions in their life, and these realizations of, it can be a burnout, it can be, people have tell me these stories of these big sort of disappointments in their career, in their personal life, and how they then kind of overcome that. And all these experiences I've had give me so many dimensions and experiences that can, help my understanding of how I can support them better. And then some of it is, and to me, it's just as important. It's I'm in a company, I'm a manager of a team, and I don't know how to juggle what I'm doing, and that's helping someone with that is also, is helping give them a better day, support other people better. And I feel there's that kind of ripple effect in the end, even if it seems less obvious kind of how that connects to all that story I'm telling. But for me, it does.
Wow, such a beautiful, beautiful journey. And I'm glad you're here with us today to share this story. How can the viewers reach out to you and know more about your services? And if they want you for guest appearances to speak about the things that you've gone through and how you got to where you are today.
So the best place is my website, I would say. So there I talk about lots of things, and definitely the services I offer. So that's www.resonance.coach. I'm also on LinkedIn a lot. So that's another place where people can find me. But if people go to my website, there's plenty of buttons to click that say get in touch, and people can get in touch.
Now, how do you spell resonance? Because we're in the United States and we spell that totally different.
Yeah, I'm sure.
That way, when they're looking, they're not putting in this.
Yeah. So it's RESONANCE. To think about it, then, RESONANCE.coach is my
Coach. Thank you so much. I wanted to clarify that because I remember that was the first thing I asked you. I was saying, okay, that's not how I spell it.
Yeah, that's it. We speak the same language, but not exactly.
Mary, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you subscribe, click, share, pass that information on. All it takes is one click of a button to change your life or make a difference in somebody else's. This has been another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Creighton Show.